Joining us now, the host of the NFL on Fox podcast, and a frequent contributor to Fox Television as well, because he's a fancy man. It's David Helman. Dave, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. When people ask you to do something, you just say yes. Like TV, sure. Podcast, the Athletic Football Show, just always say yes. I feel it served me well, and I'm happy to be here with you again.
That is typically my approach to things as well, and sometimes it gets you in trouble, but for the most part, I think it's a pretty good guiding light.
It's like I said, it's gotten me here once again, previewing an NFL season with you. So I'm not mad about it.
We're going to do something that we did last year because I'm out of new ideas, apparently. So that's what we're going to do. I enjoyed doing the show with you last year, and I actually think it's a very fun way to think about preseason storylines and how we're looking at these teams. We're going to trot out what we're calling some half-baked takes about these teams. The reason we're couching it this way is so you cannot hold us to any of this because they're not actual things that we're putting our name on. They're half-baked takes, so we can't be held accountable for them no matter which way they end up going.
It's my favorite thing is to just throw shit at the wall and then wash my hands of it if it ages terribly, which actually, so you told me like a week ago you wanted to do this again. And I think I like betrayed the spirit of the show because I went back and listened to our last one just to kind of.
You're not allowed to do that. Those don't exist.
I listened to it over again, and then I was like taking notes on stuff I want to say this year, and like halfway through that exercise, I was like, I feel like I'm betraying the spirit of the show because I shouldn't be thinking this hard about that. So I'm gonna try to. I thought about it, but I'm still going to try to keep it very irreverent so I can just be as irresponsible as possible.
That's exactly what I want. So you're going to start us off. Do you have anything particularly irresponsible that you want to get things going with?
Irresponsible is maybe a stretch, but it feels bold to me because I don't see other people saying this. Maybe I'm wrong because in this day and age, somebody has every opinion.
Everyone has said something somewhere now.
Exactly. But like in terms of like the mainstream, this isn't something I've seen a lot of. And I started last year's show with a team take. So I'll start with a team take again this year. And I want to throw this out there and say, I'm worried about the Baltimore Ravens. And I
like this a lot.
I just don't feel like anybody else is saying this. I don't feel like anybody, like, for instance, and I bring this up every time, and I'm sorry, but I covered the Cowboys for a long time. Like, for instance, we are talking a lot about how worried we are about the Dallas Cowboys. And it's not the same level of loss, but I look at what the Ravens are not bringing back this year from a 13-win AFC North champion, number one seed in the AFC playoffs, MVP. I look at all of that and I'm like, this team doesn't look as good as last year's team. And I'm not ready to like pencil them in as the division champions. And I feel like I am alone in that opinion. Do you agree?
No, because I do think some people believe that Cincinnati is going to potentially win that division, but I don't think I've heard anyone who's truly worried about Baltimore heading into this season. There's part of me that wanted to get here with this take, and there are elements of it that scared me off. So if you're trying to build this, where are you starting?
I think the easy place to start is on defense, just because you lose such a high-profile, well-respected coordinator in Mike McDonald, and you have that proverbial brain drain. But that's not what makes me worried about the Ravens so much. At least it's on the back burner to this thing, which is, I feel like a crazy person for wondering why nobody's talking about the Ravens just letting 3/5 of their offensive line walk out the door in the spring. And like, again, it's not every team is trying to replace production, but I just feel like nobody mentions that. It's just like, oh yeah, like it's Lamar and they have Derrick Henry and it'll be fine. And I'm like, and again, I know I'm trying to be irreverent, but I did look this up. I mean, they're losing 3 different starters with like 800 snaps from last year. Yes. Kevin Zeitler, John Simpson, Morgan Moses. Like, maybe none of these guys is is all world or anything. It's not like any of them had, are like these Pro Bowl guys that are irreplaceable on their own, but all three of them leaving at once. And as far as I can tell, the Ravens, so what it looks like from an outsider's perspective is Andrew Voorhees, Ben Cleveland, and I would assume Roger Rosengarten, the rookie, are like the prime candidates to step into those jobs. Cool. Ben Cleveland is the closest thing to a guy that has like played a lot of football, and he played 2 games last year. Granted, I think he was pretty good, but you're talking about a combined 150 NFL snaps for 3 guys.
All of this is completely reasonable. And we've talked about this in fits and starts over the summer. In our AFC lingering question series, we did this. I think when I talked about offensive lines with Brandon Thorne, this came up. It's a reasonable concern because, again, you have 3 new starters. There are 2 counterpoints to this, in my opinion. One, Morgan Moses was banged up a little bit last year, and they were dealing with some injury/ineffectiveness with a couple of those positions. I think there are some people who believe John Simpson wasn't quite as good as people from the outside might have believed. He's on the ground a lot. He's not as good in pass protection. Totally fair. And again, Morgan Moses was hurt a little bit. So, but you still have 3 new starters. So I think it's just that the guys they lost maybe aren't as irreplaceable as it might have seemed, even though this was a really good team. And the other side of this is they do this all the time. They cycle between these guys. They deserve the benefit of the doubt when it comes to developing these guys and figuring out solutions at those positions specifically. So they signed Josh Jones in free agency. They still have Patrick McCarry. So the hope is, even with new names, you get to a place over a 17-game season where you have a workable offensive line often enough that the other areas of the roster, a quarterback who mitigates pressure, all of those things can overcome some of those issues. I don't know if I believe that, but I think that's the argument.
If there's a team that you believe it for, I guess it's the Ravens. And look, I mean, Lamar can work around some of that stuff. And honestly, after what Derrick Henry did in Tennessee last year with that offensive line, maybe you could even argue you have a running back who is O-line proof. And I made sure to say that too.
O-line dependent than a Gus Edwards would have been.
Right, exactly. But even still, and I tried to stress that too, is like, I'm not trying to convince anybody that any of these guys are irreplaceable players. But 3 of them being gone at the same time, I don't know. I think even a team that loves draft and develop and is as good at it as the Ravens are, I think you're stressing that ability. And then remember, Ronnie Stanley is a guy that you should probably count on missing 3 or 4 games also. It's good for them. Patrick McCarry is still hanging around, but what if Rosengarten is not, I mean, he's picked 62. What if he is not quite ready for the rigors of playing right tackle in the NFL right away? Now, I mean, McCarry was incredible last year. The amount of stuff that they had to ask him to do because of injuries to Moses and Stanley, but you could be asking him to play a larger role. You could be in a situation where you're having to shuffle the line in the middle of the season. It concerns me. And again, that's without really bringing up losing Mike McDonald. And we have to see how Zach Orr steps into the defensive coordinator job. I swear to God, one of these years, it's going to matter that the Ravens don't have a true edge, right? Like, that's going to matter one year, right?
Clowney played really well for them last year. So now, again, you're banking on a step forward from some of your in-house guys that there's absolutely no guarantee there. And beyond just losing Mike McDonald, Bernard Wilson is gone. Anthony Weaver's gone. The brain drain goes beyond just the defensive coordinator.
True. Yeah.
But let's say they fall from being the best defense in the league, which they were last year, to a back half of the top 10 defense. Is the offense going to be able to pick up enough of that slack with some of those offensive line worries that you have in order for this team to still be a 10-11 win team? I think it's a reasonable question. The offense part of this, I think year 1 to year 2 of a new system where, all right, we know a little bit about what we are. We know a little bit about our pieces. Lamar's a little bit more comfortable in what we're asking him to do. That ultimately is why I couldn't get all the way there, because I'm actually putting a lot of stock in how important that transition from year 1 to year 2 is going to be and how much lifting it can do for them.
this is another thing I say about the Cowboys all the time too, which is for all the concerns I have, I'll try to keep any Ravens fans from being too mad at me. I'm not trying to pitch the Ravens as like a team that's going to miss the playoffs or have a losing record, but the standard was so high. I mean, hosting all the way through the playoffs, hosting the AFC title game, plus they beat the shit out of everybody they played in the regular season. Like they mauled the Niners, they mauled the Lions, they mauled the feisty Seahawks team. Like they kicked the crap out of everybody. And so that's, I mean, you know, that's the standard you want to be held to, I guess. That's the success you want to try to replicate. And I just have a very long list of worries about whether they'll be able to measure up to that. Like I see this as a playoff team, but maybe not a team that wins its own division, which is a pretty far fall from where they were last year.
I think all of that is totally reasonable. And again, there was part of me that wanted to do it, and a couple things held me back. So let's put this into context, because this is going to transition into my first one, or what I can make my first one. There are 4 teams that I'm looking at. And if you look at the over-under win totals, according to BetMGM, that their over-under is 10.5. The Ravens right now, to take the over, it's at -140. That's how much it's juiced up, and that's how confident people are that it's going to be over. The Eagles are at -130. The Bengals are at -145. So confidence about all of those teams hitting that over by the betting markets. The Bills are at +125. This is not okay to me. Again, I think we are too low on the Buffalo Bills. Why are people more? Maybe it's division. Maybe it's competition within division, whatever. But I think even if you go outside of that, the general narrative is, oh, the Bills are due for a downturn. Like the Bills are going to take a step back this season. I just don't know if I buy it, especially compared to teams like Cincinnati and Baltimore that people are just penciling in. The Bills' offense by the end of last season, Stephon Diggs was not a huge part of what they were doing. They gave the Steve Spagnuolo Chiefs all they could handle in that game. And I think the model that the Chiefs have followed, I'm not saying Josh Allen is Patrick Mahomes, but I think that he's within spitting distance if we're talking about the type of quarterback and the type of presence that he is within your offense. Making sure we've got it locked up front, we can pass protect, we can run the ball. We are going to trust our dynamic player at the center of all of this to lift a somewhat unproven group of skill position players. There's no Travis Kelce in Buffalo, but I think the mindset and the plan applies to the Bills in some of the same ways that it is applied to the Chiefs. And I think this offense has a chance to be very, very good. So if you're looking at the defense as the question mark, fine. They have some new pieces. They have some young pieces. This group was decimated by injuries last year. Decimated. They finished 12th in defensive DVOA. Are we not at a place where Sean McDermott deserves a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here about what type of group he can trot out on that side of the ball? So I just don't think that this stacking and this hierarchy of AFC teams where the Bills, for whatever reason, are clearly below teams like the Bengals and the Ravens, I just don't think I totally understand that.
It's the time of year where the anonymous lists are all coming out, the rankings according to whoever that didn't speak on the record. And I remember last week the coaching ranking came out, and and Sean McDermott wasn't even ranked low. I think he was like 9 or 10. And I felt like a crazy person because I was like, oh my God, am I Sean McDermott pilled that I don't think that's good enough? Like, I know the dude was just in the headlines for talking too much about 9/11 and whatever that was last year, but like, I don't think Sean McDermott gets enough credit for how just consistently really good the Bills have been. Like, nobody in the big picture of things is talking about all the stuff that went wrong on that defense last year and how well it was playing by the end of the year, just slapped together with duct tape and WD-40. And that's not to mention, obviously, overseeing the Josh Allen era. I have so much respect for the consistency that the Bills have put together. And I want to argue with you, but I feel the same way. I think maybe I will say you and I are both, and probably if you're listening to this show too, like we're football hipsters, right? Like we want to zig where everybody's zagging.
We fall in that group, unfortunately, no matter how you want to slice it.
But I will say, this isn't directed at anybody listening to this show, because like if you're listening to this show, you're a football sicko too. But the general football public, I think, values a lot of this stuff based on star power. And so you see the Bills lose Stephon Diggs, Tre'Davious White leaves, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer leave. You really haven't gotten what you thought you were going to get out of Von Miller. And so it makes sense on that level to be like, yeah, like who's stepping up for the Bills? Like, why should I feel confident about this team? My answer, I trust the defense is going to be pretty good as long as Sean McDermott's coaching it. Whatever. Sorry. I just trust it. Like, you got enough guys you can put together on the defensive front, even if it's not anything overwhelming. Hopefully Matt Milano is back to his healthy self this year. I'm really excited to see Sean McDermott working with a Utah safety in Cole Bishop. Like, that just feels like a match made in heaven. And then, oh, by the way, you got Josh Allen. Allen.
That's at the core of this. I think that there are people out there who still don't really appreciate what he is. And I know that sounds insane. The idea that, and I feel stupid even saying this, that I'm coming to this conversation and being like, I think Josh Allen might still be a little bit underrated. But I actually do think that's true. That ESPN list that Jeremy Fowler did, that he does every single year, there was someone who had Josh Allen as the 6th best quarterback in the NFL.
And they called him one of the more overrated players in the league too.
I just don't understand that. Like, even if we concede this, and this point is going to come up multiple times on the show, that Mahomes is just in a world all of his own, and I'm willing to give him that, and I will never make that mistake again. Josh Allen to me is definitively, right now, based on body of work coming into this season, the second best player, the second most important player, the second most valuable player in the NFL. And the fact that there's so many people who don't believe that, I think that's part of what is driving this. But I believe that so deeply in my soul at this point, after watching what he did last year, that's what is at the core of this for me. And that's why I think that people are just too low on this team.
I always thought highly of Josh Allen, like from 2020 onward, probably. But last year, starting with the loss in Philly, which was a loss, by the way, like they didn't even win the game, but like the degree of just putting the team on his back that we saw in that game. And then for the rest of the season onward, I think he accounted for 13 or 14 touchdowns in his final 6 games of the season. Like, just dragging a battered team to the division at the end of the season. Like, whatever I thought of Josh Allen before December of last year, it multiplied 2 or 3 times over that stretch. And I'm with you. I feel dumb saying it. I know Lamar has a second MVP trophy. I'm after Mahomes. I'm not taking anybody above Josh Allen. And you look at it,
and I think there's a tier break. I think he is firmly alone on that second line right now. I love Lamar Jackson. I think Josh Allen is alone on that second line for me right now.
I can't go that far with you. Like, I think Lamar Jackson, is in the same breath, and we'll see what Joe does this year post injury and everything. I would at least have Josh
seeing the world through Bengals color or tiger stripe colored glasses.
Yeah, no, for sure, for always and forever. But like, I'll still, at the very least, I've got to say Lamar and Josh are like 2A and 2B, like
that
below Joe or below Pat. But anyway, but the point is, I will say this: I think Josh Allen is one of 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the world where you just build the whole thing around him and he'll make it work. And quietly, I like the Bills' offensive line. Like, you always think about like, oh, the talent takes a step back. You've got to pay your quarterback. But O'Cyrus Torrance looks like he was a good draft pick. Connor McGovern played well for them last year. Like, they have good pieces up front. And then they quietly just kind of threw shit at the skill positions. And I like the way that most of it looks. Like, no, I don't like just Keon Coleman. I don't like just Dalton Kincaid. I don't like just Curtis Samuel or Khalil Shakir, but like all of that shit together. Oh, and James Cook, by the way, who had like the quietest 1,500-yard all-purpose season ever last year. And that was with some young player struggles. He felt like he dropped like 3 touchdowns over the course of the season. All of that stuff together with Josh Allen improvising and making it work and getting the ball to the right guy and extending plays. Yeah, I'm not down on the Bills at all. Like, I think I said this on Speak on FS1 last week. Like, I'm picking the Bills to win that division until somebody proves why I shouldn't. And to this point, nobody has. Maybe Aaron Rodgers will do his thing. Maybe this is finally the year for the Dolphins, but I'm absolutely still riding with the Bills until proven otherwise.
I'm with you, and that's why I can't wait until we're fantastically wrong somehow. What's your next one?
Sure. We don't acknowledge that when we're wrong. We only acknowledge the things that age well. All right. This one is kind of I'll save the out of left field one. Let's stick to a more big ticket item. And I mentioned him a minute ago. This one has the most potential to age poorly because we're coming up on the decision timeline. So maybe this will look dumb in a week or a month, but Dak Prescott, let's talk about it. Let's game this out.
Here we go. All right.
One more time. Let's game this out. But I don't care about how good you think he is. I don't care about any of the stuff that we talk about a lot. What I want to do as a half-baked take is what if Dak has basically already decided that he's done in Dallas? Like, we think about these contract negotiations in terms of like two sides coming to the table and hammering out a deal. And, you know, every good deal leaves everybody a little bit unhappy because that means there was a compromise, except Dak is in the very rare situation of having all of the leverage. It's in my opinion, it's basically completely up to him. And what if Dak is, you know, as we're recording this, the Cowboys are getting ready to fly out here to California for training camp. What if he and his camp have already kind of decided, like, unless the Cowboys make us an offer that even we can't believe, we're going to play this thing out. We're comfortable gambling without the security because we've done it before. And we're just going to make bank and move on from this organization in March. Like, what if that decision has kind of already been made?
What is the reason outside of a contract that makes him the highest paid player in the league with like $240 million guaranteed, like some sort of just insane amount of money where he trumps the Joe Burrow number with inflation based on the new cap? And like, what else could you possibly want? Unless that deal is on the table, what possible reason is there for him to not explore free agency after the year ends?
The only reason I can come up with is the value of being the face of the Cowboys and the extra exposure, endorsement money, notoriety that comes with that. That's all I've got. And I don't even believe that because
the biggest star in the world lives in Kansas City, Missouri.
Exactly. Like more and more. I mean, we're just talking about how the second best quarterback in the world lives in Buffalo. Like, I don't, yes. I don't buy this at all. And on top of that, Dak has been doing that. He's been that guy for 8 years. A, he's already reaped plenty of benefits from it. And B, his notoriety is enough that it will carry forward. Like, if he's the quarterback in a new city next year, it might not be as crazy as if he's the quarterback of the Cowboys, but he'll still get plenty of opportunities to sponsor companies and do commercials.
I think that sleep number money is still probably coming if he's in Vegas next season.
Exactly. And so, like, that's the only thing I can come up with. And I don't think that's a good enough reason.
We've talked about this. He's already done this where, okay, what's the worst case scenario if you go into a lame duck season without a contract? Oh, you get hurt. He broke his leg and then got every single thing that he wanted. Obviously, there are scenarios where it's more catastrophic than that. You can have a career-altering injury. We have seen that happen. But at quarterback, I think that those eventualities are few and far between enough that I would be comfortable if I were him and his people just saying, I want to get to a place where I can have 3 competing offers and I can drive the price up to a number that I want, because he is in that position to potentially make it happen in a way that very, very few guys ever are. Like the last guy that I think was in a somewhat similar spot to this heading into free agency, the caliber of quarterback he was at the age that he was, is maybe Kirk Cousins in 2017. And I actually think that Dak right now is a better quarterback relative to his position than Kirk was at that point. Kirk got a fully guaranteed deal from the Vikings. And I think that Dak arguably has more leverage right now than Kirk had in that moment when he first went to Minnesota. Obviously, there are guys like Peyton and Tom Brady, but those guys were in their late 30s, 40s. There were tons of question marks about what they were going to be next. That does not exist with Dak Prescott, whatever reservations you have about where he ultimately lands among quarterbacks in the NFL.
Although it is funny that, God, this feels like ancient history, but like even Peyton Manning coming off the neck injury, like this terrible injury, we were not totally sure what he would be post injury, and he still had like a LeBron James type of courtship. You know, it was like people still wanted him that badly, not knowing for sure that he would be good again, and obviously he was, but that was not a given when Denver did everything it did to woo him at the time. And yeah, and so. And I mean, I know it hurt his earning potential at least a little bit, I'm sure, but it worked out okay for Kirk Cousins, even after an Achilles tear, 5-6 years older than Dak. And I've been saying it all off season. I'm sorry if this sounds insulting, but like, do the Cowboys know the situation they're in? Like, I can't help but wonder if they don't realize it, where like, they're just like, and we've seen this time and time again. The Cowboys love to do contracts in training camp. They get out to Oxnard. The weather's better. Everybody's in the same hotel. You can't turn a corner without running into each other. And that's where they get stuff done. And it wouldn't surprise me if they're just like, yeah, well, you know, we're going to get out there. We'll get in a hotel room with Dak and his people, and or maybe just Dak's people, because Dak will be at practice, and we'll hammer this thing out, and deadlines make deals, and it's all going to be okay. What happens if they slide what they think is a really great offer across the table and it doesn't move Dak's team at all? Like, and yeah, to your point, like what if they're basically like, give us everything, all of it. Like, we want top of the market. We want best guarantees possible. We want a no trade clause and a no tag clause. Like, we want it all.
It's Andrew Garfield rolling in the social network. It's like, I'm coming back for all of it. And that is exactly what I would do if I were Todd France right now.
And there's nothing, I mean, short of giving him that, which honestly, maybe they will. And that's my other thing. I've said on the record before too, I can't help but shake a feeling that a deal gets done, because I really think at the end of the day, the Cowboys are scared of the quarterback wilderness more than they're scared of paying Dak that kind of money. Because just you can't afford you can't afford irrelevance. And so maybe the Cowboys really will just say, fine, just here's a piece of paper and you write what you want on it and we'll do it, and we'll be unhappy about it, but we'll do it. Maybe that's what happens. But if the Cowboys think that this is going to be a normal negotiation, I just think they're sadly mistaken. And I don't think Dak or Todd France or any of their team are afraid to just play this thing out and have a field day in February and March. And so my half-baked idea is maybe the Cowboys don't even factor into this as much as we're giving it all credit for. And maybe this is sort of been decided amongst themselves already, which is just wild to think about, that like the Cowboys could put a really, really nice offer in front of him. And he's like, I like my leverage a little bit more than this deal, so I'm okay.
And if anybody's going to do it, he is one of the two guys in terms of how he's handled these negotiations in the past that I would expect to potentially play it out all the way to the end. All right.
Who's the other one? Kirk
Cousins. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Let's keep the quarterback train rolling here. I want, because people are going to be like, well, what about what you just said about Josh Allen? Very carefully, I said, based on the body of work they have put on tape to this point, I think Josh Allen is clearly the second best quarterback in the league. Moving forward, my next one is, I think that CJ Stroud has a chance to be like a historically good NFL player, like multiple time MVP, like one of the players of his generation.
Now this is you followed the prompt. This is good. This is good stuff.
I went back, and when I was watching NFL defenses this offseason, when I was studying them, I'm in Arizona right now. And when I was rewatching the Cardinals defense, every time it became time to study one, I found myself clicking on their game against the Texans. Like, I was just finding excuses to go back and watch CJ Stroud. And every aspect of the way that he plays the position, to me, aligns with just being a special player at that spot in the 2024 NFL and where the NFL is going. How quickly he gets off of stuff based on what defenses are doing. How quickly he says, that's dead, I'm going here. Combined with the accuracy, the pocket movement, the arm talent, the creativity. My half-baked take is that this is going to be a guy that we look back on in 10 years. And I'm never going to take it away from Mahomes. I've learned my lesson. He is in a tier all by himself. But if we're looking at somebody that I think can consistently, when it's all said and done, be one of his foils, be somebody that goes toe-to-toe with him, steals 2, maybe 3 MVPs over the course of his career, and ends up being one of those guys that walks into the Hall of Fame, I truly think that he might be one of those guys in the spirit of this exercise.
Ooh. I mean, how do you argue with what he showed us as a rookie? But I think
it's 1 year. That's how you argue with it.
Well, exactly. But like, I mean, he's so fun and he's so poised. But I think ultimately, and CJ and Jordan Love both. When I think about both of them, and I'm cheating a little bit, but I just kind of, when I'm thinking about quarterbacks in my head, I just sort of push them off to the side. Where it's like did like need more information. Like I can't get all the way there off of one season, even though I love them both a lot. If I had to bet, I would bet that they're going places. But yeah, like how do we get there off of one season?
Here's why I feel differently about Stroud. And there's many reasons, but this is the differentiating factor between what Stroud did last year and what Jordan Love did last year. My favorite things Jordan Love did last year is drifting in the pocket. It's some of the arm talent moments. It's things that aren't necessarily in structure and in rhythm that make him special. And I think that stuff is inherently more volatile and it's inherently harder to bet on moving forward. The reason that I think Stroud is different is that this stuff is in structure. It's in the pocket. It's within what the play is asking him to do. And he's played in the league for 15 games. The fact that he's that far advanced with the mental stuff, the in-structure stuff, the within the pocket stuff, and as a thrower, he's just special. If I really tried to, I'm sure I could figure out the exact way to articulate it, but I watched that guy play, and almost immediately my response is, that's different. It's just different. And that's why I'd be willing to bet on this. And that's why I think that over time, he is going to establish himself as one of those guys.
This is a purely half-baked take. I didn't do any research beforehand. I didn't know you were going to bring Stroud up. But I would just guess, if I pulled up CJ Stroud's rookie highlights, the vast majority of them would just be throws from the pocket where he diagnoses things, gets to his second or maybe even his third read, and just rips a confident throw. And it's not a knock on anybody else, but especially with young quarterbacks, some of their best plays are either goofy arm angles or out of structure plays where, you get outside the pocket. I mean, even 2018 Mahomes, the stuff that endeared him to people was the goofy shit, like extending plays, no look throws, sidewinder throws. And like all of CJ Stroud's best plays are just like ripping a seam ball to a guy just in the tightest window from the pocket,
but there's enough of the other stuff.
Incredible.
There's enough of the other stuff. Like the one against Cleveland in the playoffs where he's flat footed and the ball comes across his body, the one to Nico Collins down the field. Like that, the arm angle, the ways he can change the arm angles and the way that he can let the ball go from a compact, dirty space and still have enough velocity, touch, and accuracy on it because of the way he plays with his base. Like those are the things that I keep coming back to, where you watch it happen and the ball just comes out of his hand in a way that's different from virtually anybody that I've ever watched play the position. And that's why I'm willing to bet on it. And the corollary of this, I'm just sneaking this in at the end. I think that Tank Dell has a chance to be like the next superstar receiver in the NFL. Like, I know that everyone's talking about Nico Collins. I know that everyone's talking about Stephon Diggs. Going back and watching as much Texans offense as I have over the last 2 or 3 months, just almost accidentally, Tank Dell is the one that consistently, the way he moves, the element he brings that offense, that's the spot and that's the thing that feels a little bit different in their skill position group. And I say this as someone who thinks that Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs are very, very good.
Yeah, I'm not sure he gets enough credit as like, it's not the big two with Tank Dell as like a forgotten element of it. Like Tank Dell, I think, is going to be a huge part of this thing. And I do love, it's the same thing the Bengals did with Burrow. I just love when a team recognizes they're like, oh, this is the guy, and let's freaking go. Because if you're going to be right, I mean, Stroud being amazing is the biggest part, but I just love how the Texans seem to be bought in on maximizing that. Like, it's such a big think about Trevor Lawrence. You know, I mean, he's already on this new deal without the Jags ever having benefited from having him at such low cost. Meanwhile, and we'll see if they do it. Obviously, we have no idea, but the Texans are considered a Super Bowl contender in year 2 of CJ Stroud's 5 cheap years. If the Texans keep rolling on that, even if they pay him after next year, they're still in position to put a fantastic team together for at least the next 3 or 4 years before they need to retool. So I think that's a huge part of it. Although I've decided I want to argue with you about this, just be like, I love CJ Stroud, but just in the interest of argument, how do we not know that CJ Stroud won't, like, how do you know he won't just be the next guy that can't get past Mahomes? Like, if that's how we want to talk about this guy, that's how you're measuring every quarterback, is like, are you good enough to do that? Because so far, Josh Allen can't do it. Lamar Jackson can't do it. We say those are 2 of the 5 best. Joe Burrow did it once and then promptly couldn't stop Mahomes from getting to another Super Bowl. And it's crazy. The guy's only like 28 years old, but like, that's the standard you have to measure any young quarterback against.
Okay. So, but what about Peyton Manning's career? Peyton Manning got past Tom Brady how many times in the 20 years that Tom Brady was around? We still talk about Peyton Manning with real reverence, like one of the true legends in the history of the sport, despite existing in the exact same era that Tom Brady existed. I think that you can have multiple of these guys. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying he's going to go blow for blow with Mahomes in the playoffs or trade off MVPs or have the same sort of career. I'm talking about stealing a couple MVPs along the way and then sneaking by for maybe 1, maybe 2. And that's enough. If you play at a ridiculously high level from a production standpoint, and that's the hardware you're walking away with, that's rarefied air. And I do think that he has a chance based on what we saw last year and the irresponsibility that we're sprinkling into this exercise for him to potentially get there.
It is so sick how Brady and now Mahomes, like, it just skews so many things. Cause like, yes. I mean, Peyton Manning's career is an unmitigated success, but yeah, when you measure it up against something like what Tom Brady did, and yeah, like if CJ Stroud retires with 1 championship, he would be one of Houston's all-time greatest athletes, but compare him to a guy who has yet to miss the AFC championship game in his career. And it can skew the way you think about it, but you're right. And I mean, has CJ Stroud even turned like 24 yet?
I don't think so. I think he's much younger than that. I mean, he came out after 3 years.
You're right.
CJ Stroud is 22 years old.
22, turns 23 during this season. Yeah, I mean, of the guys 24 and younger, however many of them there are, who do you feel better about than CJ? I mean, maybe, but that's the crazy thing, man. I keep thinking about like CJ wasn't an afterthought because he was the number 2 overall pick, but like CJ, for instance, because I was about to bring up Caleb, and like CJ was not getting the airtime and the hype that Caleb is. And now a year later, we're talking about him as a future All-Pro, MVP, Super Bowl champion. And it's crazy the difference 10 months can make. And who knows how we'll feel about this once we've had Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels and whoever else thrown into the mix as well.
I liked CJ Stroud coming out. He was my favorite quarterback in that draft. If you go back and listen to our pre-draft show about that position, I said something like, what if he's Joe Burrow 25% of the time? Like, that's what I was talking about with CJ Stroud. He's in a completely different stratosphere than that already after one season. And I said 2 or 3. I said 2 MVPs. It would probably have to be more than that for him to hit what I'm talking about. Probably talking like 3 or 4 over the course of the years. But Lamar already has 2. People get bored. It's very hard to win the MVP every single year. Like, ask Michael Jordan, ask Tom Brady, ask anybody who's had to endure people getting their eyes glazing over because you've been doing it at such a consistent clip for so long. You can do it. Peyton Manning, again, is a testament to it. So I've wanted to walk this back, and I've wanted to pump the brakes with him. And with the Texans, I still have some concerns that we'll get to eventually. But with him specifically, it's full steam ahead for me.
Like I said, you never know what's going to happen, but of guys that you feel comfortable betting on, yeah, I mean, we have I don't see any tangible evidence other than what if shit happens, like, I mean, yeah, injuries or whatever, knock on wood, but like, I don't have a good tangible reason not to feel like CJ Stroud's going to be a superstar. I mean, he already kind of is, but I just think he's going to build on that for sure.
What's your next one?
All right, let me get weird with it. And I've been thinking about this since the schedule came out, because that's when we learn things like this. And actually, it was 2 teams that it made my radar go off, where I was like, what the hell is going on? The Pittsburgh Steelers and your Chicago Bears don't play any of their division games until the second half of the season. And I mean, I'm not all knowing, but again, I've been doing this for quite a while, and if it's ever happened before, it hasn't happened often. And so I saw that way back in April or May, and I was like, holy shit, these teams are going to have to play their entire division schedule like after Halloween. That feels unusual to me. So then I went and looked it up. And I was just curious. I'm like, who else is doing this? What else is going on? So I looked at it. More than half the league, 17 teams to be exact, are playing 2 or fewer division games in the first half of the season. 5 different teams are playing 1 or less. So Chicago, Dallas, Philly, Pittsburgh, and Tennessee are playing either 1 or 0 division games in the first half of the season. So then I go and I look the whole thing up. Sure enough, and obviously week 18 kind of skews things because the NFL puts every game as a division game, which I love. But even without that, Robert, in the last 6 weeks of the season, there are 34 division games.
That's insane.
As opposed to there are 38 in the first 9 weeks. So we're playing basically half the division games in the final month of the season. And here's the thing that makes it half-baked is I have no idea how normal this is. Maybe the people that put the NFL
I don't think it's
together,
normal.
It doesn't feel
abnormal.
normal to me. It feels
the Bears and the
very
Packers played in week 1 last year.
Right. I went and looked it up last year. 2023, there were 14 division games in the first 2 weeks of the season. This year, where are my this year stats? See, this is not half baked because I spent a shitload of time on it, honestly. But I think it's crazy. Yeah, there's only There's only like 5 or 6 division games in the first 2 weeks of the season.
So what do you think? First of all, what is your half-baked take about this? And second of all, how do you feel about this?
My half-baked take is that the December and January are going to be a fucking demolition derby. Like, I just think we know division games are tougher. We know there are a couple of divisions that are very, even. Obviously, the NFC North stands out. The AFC North, Robert, in case you were wondering because of my Steelers stat, the AFC North plays 9 of its 12 games after Halloween, and half of them, so 6 of 12 AFC North games, are happening after Thanksgiving. So I think the NFL was like, these competitive divisions that anybody could win, let's put that shit to the test and see what it's going to look like when these teams are just playing each other every 2 or 3 weeks. So my half-baked take is that I think we're going to see some wacky shit because a lot of teams aren't going to get into the meat of their division schedule until the weather's bad, their roster is beat up, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess if you're asking me how I feel about it, I think it's going to be really fun. Like, I think we could see just some crazy stuff. I think we're going to see some leads get lost. I think we're going to see some teams come out of nowhere. I mean, for instance, let Baltimore and Cincinnati, like if these teams aren't playing their division games until late November, early December, what if one of those teams really pulls their shit together at that time of year and just rips off 4 division wins in the last 6 weeks of the season, and all of a sudden a team that was 500 is now gunning for a top seed in the playoffs? Like, I think it could be very, very fun.
Let's put some tinfoil hats on here because I think this is totally plausible. I have no inside information about this. How predictable would it be if the league was using this as a test to figure out, is this the best way to make sure we're getting meaningful football down the back half of the year? And do we now do this just as a standard? The division you play in the other conference and the 2 divisions that you play as part of your schedule, we're cramming that in to the first half of the year. And then we're putting most of your division games and then your seeding games. So if you won your division, you played the winner of the other divisions. So obviously those are important for seeding. We're going to cram every important game into the back half of the year because that's when we care about juicing up TV ratings, and we don't want meaningless games being played at that point in the season.
I have no problem believing that at all. I mean, we already kind of have it like that. I don't remember what year it became a staple for the season finale to be a division game, but it's at least been a thing for 15 or so years at minimum.
Yeah, I don't remember a world where that wasn't the case.
And so, but look how much compelling TV it creates. Like, you've got division titles up for grabs. You've got playoffs, wild cards up for grabs. Like, that is already an easy way to fix it for maximum drama. And yeah, if you want to backload this thing, I think that's very plausible that they're like, we want the most compelling matchups possible for late in the season. And this feels like the easiest way to ensure that happens.
All right, I'm going to do another kind of league-wide-ish one here. I think there's a chance we could be looking at a bloodbath with the NFC head coaches after the season is over. I had 6 that I think you could make a solid argument right now don't have the strongest job security. And you could hem and haw about a couple of these. Dallas and the Giants immediately, right? At 75% of the NFC East. Dallas, Giants, Eagles. Mm-hmm. I don't think it would be hard for anyone to imagine all 3 of those head coaches getting fired after the season. Right?
Agreed.
3 other teams. Saints, feels like we're like halfway to that happening already based on the state of that franchise right now. I know the Bucs won the division last year, but I don't think that Todd Bowles' body of work leaves him immune to surviving a bad season in Tampa if it goes that way. And I know that they were surprising last year. They punched above their weight. This is a team, if you look at the advanced metrics, were a below average offense last year. And I still have some real questions about areas of their personnel on defense, specifically on the back end. If the Bucs were a 6-11 team this year, would you be shocked?
Shocked? No. Yeah. I mean, they seem like, even if you like them, they seem like a prime candidate for the classic good team regresses by a few wins, which when you're 9-8, regressing by a few wins could mean 6-11, 7-10.
And then the other one I had was the Bears. The Chicago Bears, you go out and you get Caleb Williams, you trade for Keenan Allen. If you're Ryan Poles, you could poke holes in this because I do think that there are areas of concern on the defense, especially along the defensive line. If you're Ryan Poles, I think you could very reasonably go to ownership if this season goes south and say, listen, I had the groceries. I did everything I needed to do to put this team in a position to be successful, and this group couldn't get it done. There are people who wanted Matt Eberflus to be fired after this season. So if this team wins 6-7 games and they fall short of what have become pretty sizable expectations, it's not hard to imagine at all that they move on from that coaching staff. That's 6 teams. And that's before we even get into a Pete Carroll sort of situation, something surprising happening. Like, there's a real chance that we see an inordinate amount of coaches that are no longer with their team after this season in the NFC.
Okay, I have 2 things. Let's start with the Bears because I'm curious about this. And this, I've gotten asked this question a bunch of times. Everybody wants to know what a realistic expectation is for Chicago. And I firmly say, like, I have high expectations for Caleb as a player. Obviously, it would not be very hard for him to be the best rookie quarterback in Bears history, but I don't care. I don't care that he's been tabbed as the chosen one for 2 or 3 years at this point. I don't think it's fair to put playoff aspirations on Caleb or on a Bears team that has been through so much disarray in the last 3 or 4 years. So having said that I don't really expect the Bears to be a playoff team, I don't think it's fair to put that on Caleb Williams as a rookie. What would be bad enough to get Matt Eberflus fired, in your opinion?
The offense has to look disjointed. The person that they chose to be the offensive coordinator there after moving on from the last guy. And we've seen this. When you fire a coordinator and you don't get it right, there's a very good chance that you could probably be on the way out. So if Shane Waldron's offense, if they're like 22nd or 23rd on offense, or maybe even a little bit worse than that, and it just never comes together, that's step one. And the entire reason that Matt Eberflus is back as the head coach of the Bears is what they did on defense over the back half of last season. And if they backslide on that side of the ball, which I think is possible, because of the issues and because of the lack of aggressiveness and adding to the pass rush, I absolutely think it is possible for them to take a significant step back on defense from where they were at the end of last year. If this is an average defense or slightly below average defense and the offense does not come together quickly, I think that is a recipe for people getting really uneasy really fast.
Yeah, you're right. And the quickest way to piss everybody off is if an offense with this much star power isn't good. I mean, it doesn't have to be top 5 in the league, but it damn well better be fun to watch, Robert, because I've been hoping Chicago's offense.
You're telling me, man.
I've been wanting this since they drafted Fields, and now it really feels possible. And if it's boring, if it's ugly, a lot of people are going to be disillusioned. Like, forget the record. I just want it. Going back to CJ Stroud, I want to be able to flip over to what the Bears are doing in any given week and have a good time, regardless of what their record is. Because that's one of my lasting memories.
Has that ever happened?
Well, that's what happens when you draft a rare quarterback into an even rarer situation. Like, these expectations are not comfortable. And again, I'm not even asking the Bears to win a ton of games, but come on, like what's stopping us from being fun? It at least needs to be fun.
That's where I land on this. I want to look forward to every single Sunday. I want to get up in the morning and be in a good mood about the fact that I have to watch the football team that plays in Chicago. And I do think it can happen. I'm giving the worst case scenario here for how this season can go. I think there are much better potential timelines here based on what they did on defense in the second half of last season, the talent that they have in the back seven, what things looked like with Montez Sweat, and just the pure amount of skill position talent and the upside at quarterback. Like, I do think this can all come together, but I think that we've gotten a little bit ahead of ourselves. The fact that their over under right now is 9.5 at BetMGM, that's really, really crazy for a team with a rookie quarterback
Their
that was picking in the
over-under
top
is
10 last year.
9.5.
9.5.
Again, and I don't mean to sound dismissive, but like it's easy to get or pretentious, but it's easy to get caught up in the hype when you can just lift off that many, great players. And the Bears do have name power. When you go down the roster of like, oh yeah, he's going to be throwing to DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and DeAndre Swift is there and Cole Kmet's a serviceable tight end. Like that's how the hype train gets away from you. 9.5 is crazy to me, but like I said, you got Caleb, you got all that talent around him. That's what happens.
Beller, you tell me if I'm wrong about this. You look this up and see if I'm missing something here. It opened at 8.5 at BetMGM, but I'm literally looking at Vegas Insider and I'm looking at the BetMGM column right now, and it says 9.5 over under for the Chicago Bears.
I'll take a look. But if it says it there, I'm sure you're right.
Okay. I'm not
definitely open at 8.5.
I'm not as deep into this as some of the other degenerates out there, but based on a very quick peruse on the internet, that's where we have landed according to Vegas Insider. So whatever the number is, I think that the hype train has gotten a little bit off the rails. All right. What's your next one?
All right. Do you have another 2024 specific one? Because this is my last big one, and it's kind of out of left field. So if you want to talk some more specifically 2024 football, I will defer to you before I get.
All right, I got two more of those. I have two more of those. We can run through these fairly quickly.
Okay.
I think the Titans are my sneaky wild card team.
Okay.
I don't love what they did from a roster building standpoint. I really don't. Like, I think that the runway for how they added talent to the team, the age of players that they added, doing all of it through free agency, I don't know how all of that looks in 2025, but we've seen this in the past where teams spend a shitload in free agency and they're much better than we anticipated for a 1-year spike, and then things come back to earth. I remember the 2017 Jags. I remember the 2018 Bears. I was there for both of those. I think there's a chance that the Titans can be one of those teams. And they're over under 6.5. Like, people anticipate the Titans being bad at football this year. I do think with Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, and for me, when you add receivers like that in free agency and you bring in an offensive coordinator like or play caller like Brian Callahan, who's done really good work with skill position talent, who prioritizes skill position talent when you're building the roster, but also how you're shaping your offense. My biggest issue with them, with both talent and priorities, would have been the offensive line. But the Bill Callahan of it all, combined with all of these other factors and what they did building that offense around Jake Browning last year, and how I think some of those ideas could potentially set Will Levis up for success, I think that there is a path forward for that offense to be above average right away. They have enough talent on defense combined with a guy in Denard Wilson that I'm pretty high on. Like, I think that him coming from Baltimore and, what he can do there as the defensive coordinator. Again, I don't know if this is 10 wins on a path to being a contender in 2025 and beyond, but I think a 10-win wild card season is on the table for the 2024 Titans specifically.
I don't have the guts to ride with you there, mainly because the AFC is so loaded. And I think there are things worth being concerned about. I won't be surprised if, and it looks really good on ourlads.com right now. Like, looking at the depth chart, it looks really good. But for instance, like, is it going to shock anybody if you're in October, like, yeah, DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, and Tyler Boyd, like, that would have been a lot better in 2021 than it is in 2024.
And there's a chance that one or two of those guys is hurt as they start playing into their 30s. Like, this to me is a small needle to thread, but I do think that there is a chance it all comes together and they're more competitive quickly than people anticipate. But again, for a short time, I'm not bullish on them long-term necessarily based on the moves that I've made, but for a blip here, I think it can all come together in a pretty potent way.
What I will say is this, and I think, honestly, my half-baked take is I think a lot of general managers are afraid to do this because as much as you want to win and compete and earn the respect of your peers and fans and media, I think a lot of general managers want to have a fallback reason as to why they're not good. Like, well, yeah, of course we're not good. We still have this young quarterback and we have the offensive line's a mess and blah, blah, blah. I respect the hell out of Ran Carthon I just feel like the Titans plan this offseason was we're going to know if Will Levis is a guy by the end of this year, come hell or high water. We are not messing around. Like we're hiring Bill Callahan. We're drafting offensive line with a big pick. We're signing a big time center. We're signing a Pro Bowl running back. We got, all these receivers are close to qualifying for early bird specials, but they're good players. And like there shouldn't be an excuse if we don't know what Will Levis is by the end of this season, then that probably means we know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I respect Ran Carthon for that, for just saying, hey, we were a bad team. We have the cap space to push our chips in, not push our chips in to contend, but push our chips in to build a competent football team and find out if this quarterback is somebody worth building around. Otherwise, we're going to get the hell out. And maybe the Titans won't make the playoffs, but I do think they will have accomplished that goal, which I think is really all you can ask for. And shoot, maybe on the way to finding that out, they'll get to a wild card game.
I think they have a chance to be a surprisingly competent team. And we know that it doesn't take that many lucky bounces to go from surprisingly competent to 9 or 10 win wild card team. That is possible. And I think they could be one of the teams that do it this year.
Okay, this reminded me of a take that I didn't put on my rundown, but I did want to throw out here for you. As long as this is sort of what we're talking about, I don't buy any enthusiasm about the LA Chargers other than that it's cool to have Jim Harbaugh back in the league.
This is solely a bet on Jim Harbaugh. Every single person that's like, yeah, the Chargers are my sneaky wild card team, or I think the Chargers are actually going to be a lot better than they were last year. The only conceivable reason that you would be able to say that is that you think that Jim Harbaugh is a special football coach and you think that he can tap into something in Justin Herbert that allows Justin Herbert to play like one of the 3 or 4 most valuable players in the league, which is possible, but that's solely where you are putting your chips.
He probably deserves that level of respect, but
a lot of respect, man.
Sure. Well, to be clear, like I feel good about it in the long run because I like Jim Harbaugh and I like Justin Herbert. But this year, you talk about like teams that are fun to check in on Red Zone and stuff. I feel like I'm going to check in on Justin Herbert trying not to cry like every other week. And I feel bad about it because I love Justin.
You don't believe in Ladd McConkey?
I actually love Ladd McConkey. He's a fun player, but
I also like Ladd McConkey a lot.
It's not enough. It's not enough. And I think I'm going to spend the fall feeling bad for Justin Herbert and then reminding myself how much money he makes to make myself feel better about it.
I saw a graphic today on the internet, and then we've jumped the shark so far with this stuff. I can't even start with it. It was one of those aggregator sites, and the graphic was Quentin Johnston demoted to 4th string in all bold. That's where we are right now. The convergence of all of these types of accounts and the start of training camp in 2024 specifically, it is going to be an awful week as we get started here. Like a truly insufferable week. I think I'm going to have to take a break from the internet like 3 or 4 different times.
I'm starting to feel like what I've always hated. Like I was a beat writer for so long and I used to fight with PR. Like, you've got to let us report this stuff. You've got to let us film video. People need to know these things. And the older I get, the more I'm just like, close training camp. Like we don't, we're good. Like when we're ready, like we can see the preseason games and that's it. It just creates such a headache. That's very tongue in cheek for the record. I love training camp is a lot of fun, but the noise and the overreaction and the news cycles that get created.
Just think about what OTAs was like this year. Yeah. Just think back to what OTAs was like 2 months ago and imagine what this is going to be here over the next month. I digress.
Just head on a swivel, choose your sources carefully.
I have one more 2024 specific one. We don't have to belabor this.
Okay.
I think around the midseason point, you're going to be sitting there on the desk at Speak on FS1, and there's going to be a cryon below you that says, is Jared Goff the MVP of the NFL?
I like it. I mean, okay, like, yeah, let's go. I mean, sell me on it. It's easy to imagine. I mean, the Lions are loaded.
Bringing Ben Johnson back is I think it's one of the most important things that happened in the NFL this year. The continuity that this team has on offense, bringing back a guy who has established himself as a top 5 play caller in this league. Like, I have no issue saying that whatsoever. I think he is at that level, combined with the continuity they have with their personnel. I mean, you're slotting Jamison Williams in the Josh Reynolds role, which, and I've said this a ton, that I think that skill set within the offense and maybe not having it is something that we probably should be talking more about, but I don't think it's a deal breaker by any stretch. And they lose Jonah Jackson, who has been in and out of the lineup over the last couple of years. They replaced him with Kevin Zeitler. This team has a ton of talent. They were rolling by the end of last season. And in a situation where 99 times out of 100, you lose that play caller to a head coaching job, instead, they get him back. Their first 7 games, including a week 5 bye: Rams, Bucks, Cardinals, Seahawks, Cowboys, Vikings, Titans. They come out of that potentially 6-1. Or 7-0. Like, that's not hard to imagine, them being the team of the first half of the season and us sitting there being like, I don't know, man. I think you have to give Jared Goff the MVP. I think that is potentially on the horizon.
I think someday soon we can move past the whole, the Lions of it all. Like, oh my God, isn't this a crazy story? From rags to riches. But it is still crazy to wrap your head around the fact that, like, we always say this too. We're like, progress is not a linear chart. You know, you're going to have
for
some
them. It is though.
That's what I was about to say.
Yes.
From 3-13-1 to 9-8, no playoffs, to 12-5, probably should have been in the Super Bowl. It's crazy to think that, like, the only way the Detroit Lions can improve on where they've been is to be in the Super Bowl this year. And if they pull it off, and I would say off the top of my head, I think the Lions are one of the 4 best teams in the NFL. And if they pull that off, if they are back in the NFC title game, if they're making a run at the Super Bowl, of course Jared Goff will be in the MVP conversation. My only pushback on that, and I swear I'm not talking shit about Jared Goff. I think you could say the exact same thing about Dak Prescott, is that, like, I could easily imagine Jared Goff building his MVP hype over 6 or 7 weeks. And like, I'm looking at the schedule right now. So, Jared Goff is building all of this amazing hype. And then they go into Houston Sunday night
play
football.
The Packers the following week. But that was what I was thinking. Or they play the Packers the week before, right?
The Packers are the week after the Texans. No. I'm sorry. You're right. It's Packers before, and then Texans. Yeah.
So the reason I know that is because I was originally going to frame this as, in the lead up to Sunday Night Football against the Texans, are we going to be having this, is Jared Goff the MVP of the NFL thing? That runs counter to some points I plan on making about the Green Bay Packers defense over the next month.
Fair.
So I can't hold both of those things together at the same time. It's the only reason I didn't frame it that way.
Jared Goff, and like I said, like, I'll throw Dak in there. I think you could say this about Kirk Cousins whenever Kirk has had really good seasons, is that, like, the meme about, like, 1 p.m. Kirk versus 7 p.m. Kirk, Jared Goff falls into a category where, like, he could build his MVP hype over 5 or 6 weeks and then get sacked 4 times and they just get destroyed in a primetime game. And it just undoes all of that goodwill. It happens to Dak all the time. He got crushed by the Niners last year. He's rebuilding his MVP case, and then they go and just lay an egg in Buffalo in some bad weather. Like, it's unfortunate, but narrative is just as important as stats. And
this is such a good point, because Jared Goff last year threw for 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns. David Montgomery had 13 rushing touchdowns. Let's take 5 rushing touchdowns away from the Lions and give them to Jared Goff. A 4,500 yard, 35 touchdown season is absolutely in play for Jared Goff in the range of outcomes. It's not even an outlandish outcome, The problem is that game, that stinker game, and how much that matters in this discussion. Jared Goff is prone to those, and that's what worries me about this.
Yeah, I mean, how much better would Jared Goff's MVP case have been last year if they don't get spanked by the Ravens? I mean,
Or
absolutely.
that game against the Bears, that shitty game
Yeah.
you get played against the Bears.
So you not only have to win, and you have to have impressive stats, and you can't screw up when the entire league is watching, which maybe, he fumbled several times against Green Bay on Thanksgiving and they lost to the Packers. You can't have a moment like that. Or if you do, it's got to be buried on a day where a bunch of other shit happens and nobody really notices.
Yeah, I love this. This is a very good point, and I probably should have taken that into account, but I think it's important to remember. All right, what was your last one? What was your last out of left field one that was not tied to the 2024 season?
Okay, I'm glad it works well that we're talking about MVP, though, because my last take is I am ready to completely revamp NFL awards and the postseason, like the awards we give out, NFL honors, whatever you want to call it. We need better. And that the NFL is always bigger, always better. Everything's an event. We turned the draft into a 1 million person live party. It travels. There's no off season. I mean, the NFL has basically mastered it to where there's only like 10 days on the calendar that it doesn't completely dominate. And then, Robert, I went and counted it. You realize, like, we give out as a league community 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We give out 8 awards. And then on top of that, we can pencil names in for a few of these. Like, we know NFL MVP, barring something nuts, is going to be a quarterback. And we know at this point, this is what got me thinking about this is, again, I'm a football hipster. I'm trying to think of a defensive player of the year candidate that is like outside the box, AKA not Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Max Crosby, or Micah Parsons, or we'll throw in Nick Bosa too. But I could sit here. If I gave you those names for the field right now, what would you take?
Probably those names.
Exactly. And it's not right. It's not a disrespect to any of those guys, but we just don't honor enough of what happens in a given season. That's fine. Give NFL MVP to a quarterback and give defensive player of the year to the best edge rusher, because that's what it's become. But why can't we do more than that? Like, why do we spend all this time arguing about, oh, well, he's really the defensive player of the year and nobody's talking about it, when instead, and Robert, you know I am a college football junkie, I went and counted it. There's like 20 awards that we give out in college football every year. I mean, of course, you've got your Heisman, you've got your coach of the year, you've got your assistant coach of the year, et cetera, et cetera. But like, we have an award in college football for every position. And more so than that, they have badass names. Like, we give out the Bolitnikoff to the best receiver. We give out the Bednarik to the best defender. We give out the Davey O'Brien to the best quarterback. The Mackey to the best tight end. My favorite, did you know there is an award called the Joe Moore Award that goes to the best?
I was going to mention the Joe Moore Award.
It's 800 pounds. It's a whole trophy case unto itself. College football,
fully support this. You don't this requires no convincing for me whatsoever. As somebody who loves to argue about this shit, I want more of these. The hill that I will die on, I have brought this up, I think, in some capacity every single year for the last 10 years. The NFL should have a Heisman-like award that is given to the most outstanding player. Every single year, we should take a step back and we should say, who was the best player in the NFL? Because we know that's not the MVP anymore. The MVP goes to the best quarterback, and often it goes to the quarterback of the best team. Right. That is what happens with the MVP now. And that's fine. If quarterbacks are the most valuable players, and if value is going to be part of it, then it should go to the quarterbacks. But if we had an award that was designed for the most outstanding player in the league, could you imagine in 2012, like the arguments between whether Adrian Peterson or JJ Watt should be the NFL Heisman? I would love that. Like, think about how good that would be. Aaron Donald would have won it multiple different times. Like, the fact that there was no way to acknowledge in any official capacity ever that Aaron Donald was the best player in the NFL at any given time, that's nonsense. We should absolutely have that.
I think we should have it for every major position. And like, we'll still do all pros. So, your fave will get to be an all pro, but like, imagine how much fun it would be to have a NFL version of the Bolitnikoff where the best receiver gets to get up. We could call it, and we could name it after NFL legends. Like, it could be the Moss or the Rice Award.
I think the Jerry Rice Award should be the overall most outstanding player. I think the NFL Heisman should be named after Jerry Rice, but you name it after Randy Moss, whatever.
Fine. Imagine with the amount of with the amount that DBs argue and take pride in their craft, and they're
incredible.
Can you imagine like stumping for the Charles Woodson Defensive Back of the Year award? And again, the NFL loves spectacle. Just add it to NFL honors. It's already this huge award show. Just give out more awards, because as it is right now, we're only giving out like 8 of the things.
Yeah, you think we could lose the musical numbers or whatever it is they're filling time with on the NFL? I've never watched the NFL honor show. I'll fully admit that right now.
I watched it I went one year and saw it. And I mean, it's cool. And it's like, kudos to the NFL. Cause again, they have mastered turning things like it used to be a press release and now it's a 3-hour award show that people watch. But imagine if we actually gave out more hardware, and then every fan would have a reason to get invested. Because even if you're a fan of a terrible team, your terrible team probably has a great player. And it would mean a lot to you if he could win the most outstanding linebacker award or whatever it is. And then that could factor into your Hall of Fame credentials. Like, we would have even more to help us build these cases for great players. And I just think it's kind of weird that it hasn't happened yet.
I fully support this. You're going to hear no arguments from me whatsoever. Let's get this done.
Yeah, let's holler at me, NFL. We can put committees together. We can get like former players on them. You got my email. It's fine.
David Helman, always great to chat with you, sir. Please tell people where they can listen to, read, pay attention to the things that you're doing right now.
Season 2 of the NFL on Fox podcast is back at the beginning of August. So really excited about that. A lot of fun stuff in store there. You can find me, foxsports.com, all my writing. FS1, I do appear on Speak on FS1 from time to time. Follow me on Twitter if you want to, David Helman _. Yeah, man, we're back in the saddle for another season, and I'm so excited about it. Thanks for having me.
Of course, buddy. Anytime. We'll talk to you soon.